Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch. I'm the host of this podcast, and we are your number one podcast for bringing you stories around death, dying, and grief, and all the messiness that comes in between, with some amazing people out here doing amazing things, changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. Now, before I bring on my next guest, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head on over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. Now, this is a live stream, so if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. Now, before we get started, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. And now, without further ado, guys, help me welcome my next guest, Dr. Santina Weed. Doctor, how we doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me today, Tony. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. I'm looking forward to today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. So I am Dr. Santina, or Tina Wheat. I go by Tina to all of my friends and family. And just a little bit about me, if that's okay, is I am a family physician, and I am also a career and life coach who helps folks figure out how to conquer their chaos and get to calm, to figure out how to balance their chaos at home and work and figure out a way to navigate it all. And all of this really started when I tried to figure out how to navigate my way out of burnout after dealing with my own grief, after losing both of my parents, but really after losing my mom, and figuring out how to navigate all of that when watching her battle the craziness that is the healthcare system from the perspective of a daughter.
Right. And you know, the health, I was just getting a conversation not too long ago about our healthcare system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how it has changed over the years. But maybe it hasn't changed. Maybe the challenges were always there and we've just turned a blind eye to them and things like that. And so what were some of the things that you've experienced dealing with the healthcare system? Because we all have these nightmares, right? You know, these nightmare stories. What are some of the things that you experienced yourself?
So there's so many, and I think that we have all experienced the time of feeling like we're not heard. I have shared stories about how my mom was an educated woman. She was someone who had essentially a PhD in education. She was a principal. She taught others how to advocate for themselves. And when she was in that hospital bed, her doctors didn't listen to her. They didn't hear her when she said that she wanted things done. And there were these times where she would just look at me, and I would turn to her physicians and I would say, look, she told you no, she doesn't want this done. And they would ignore me and say, oh no, we're the A team, we can do this. And as someone who understood medical education, as someone who knew how the system would work, I would walk out of the room and I'd go and find their supervisors and I would be like, hey, I've tried. I tried to talk to your residents. I tried the polite way, but look, I am a physician. I know how this works, and I'm telling you no. And it was horrible to feel like I had to use the fact that I was a physician myself, and it didn't matter that I was a daughter. That I actually wrote an article that was I had to use my title in vain. That I had to use this title as opposed to just the fact that I was a daughter to get the work done. And it is horrifying to feel that that was what was needed. And I know that my patients go through this every day. I know that when they feel like they have to navigate the system without the tools, that it is even harder. When I know that I know the system and I know the tools, and it's still frustrating for me to navigate through it. So some of it is just the navigating the insurance, navigating the what are the words that you have to say to get things done, navigating the how do I get the advocate involved? And some of it is navigating the what do we just not know in the processes, or what do we not know about health to get us through.
Right. And it may add to that as well, because there, a lot of times, because I've had to go through my own little nightmares dealing with the healthcare system, and no one wanted to listen to myself or at that time my son's mom when we were telling them the things that was going on. They didn't want to listen to them. And I think a lot of it, and I could be wrong, but for some odd reason, it always make it feels like ego and pride. Like,
Mhm.
well, I went and did 12 years to go get this degree. I know what I'm talking about, and you don't know type thing, right?
Mhm.
And it's almost as if they look down on people as if people don't know what they need or know what maybe their loved one needs or something like that.
Mhm.
So I mean, and I don't want to be that way, but it almost, as someone who's been on the receiving end, a lot of ego, a lot of pride.
And you're absolutely right, and it's so hard. It's so hard being someone who's on both sides of that, right?
Mhm.
I've definitely been on the side where I think that my patients think that of me, or their families think that of me, and I never want them to think that of me. And I've definitely been on the side of trying to be the advocate for my loved one, or being the advocate for myself when I feel like I'm not being heard. And I feel like there has to be a way. There has to be a way to bridge that barrier. There has to be a way to develop that relationship, to have that conversation for both sides to be heard. Because sometimes the healthcare team is wrong. Sometimes we are wrong. And sometimes the family doesn't have all of the information. There's definitely space on both sides, but we have to come together. There has to be a way for us to come together in those stressful situations to navigate what is best for that person who is sick, for the person who is trying to struggle through what is going on, to figure out what is the right path for them, because there's not the perfect guideline for each person, unfortunately. There's not the perfect Google search for each person.
Yeah.
And it has to be a combination of what the family is seeing and what the healthcare team knows to be the way that diseases work to get through for the right thing. And it's so hard to find that balance, especially right now where there seems to be so much frustration, so much bureaucracy, and unfortunately, so much mistrust in all that is happening.
Yes, yes, yes. Excuse me. And you're absolutely right, because as you were saying that, I was like, the trust factor
Mhm.
um, is kind of broken. People are seeing things, hearing things. They're reading articles, they're reading stuff on social media, and
Mhm.
you hear about all of these things like, oh, this is what we're doing in healthcare, and over a period of years. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my experience, just a little
Mhm.
bit. Over the years, you see medications come out, and then a few years after that, you see that dreadful commercial. Have you or
Mhm.
a loved one, right? You know which ones I'm talking
I
about. You
sure
know,
do.
so
Or the billboard as you're driving.
right, or the billboard, right? And
Mhm.
I was doing some research, and someone was saying, yeah, most of the medications that come out, they've already anticipated the amount
Mhm.
of deaths that's associated with this. And so I'm like, well, if you've already anticipated, why are you playing God with people? Why are you experimenting with people? This is where the trust issue comes from, right? And I could be wrong. I do think there's a multitude of things that can be added on to there. Now, as I want to backtrack a little bit before we dive
Mhm.
into that. The grief that you experience, how did you navigate that? Because there's I want to say there's complicated grief, right? And some sort of anticipatory grief, and maybe a little bit displaced.
Yeah, so I will say I did not navigate my grief well initially. And I will say that I'm someone who thought that I was just going to follow this path and then everything was going to be okay.
Right, right.
And particularly as a physician, what I was taught was that grief was going to be about 2 months and then it would be okay. So I
Mm.
thought I was going to hit this magic timeline at 2 months and then things were going to start to look better. But
Yeah.
that doesn't work. That's
No,
not
no.
real. Nobody told me that there were going to be those days that hit harder and those days that were better, and that there would be things that would remind me not just of when she died, but of the fact that I was going to be reminded of the challenges that I experienced of her being in the hospital, because, especially because my work life meant that I was seeing it all of the time,
Mhm.
that there were these things that would just keep bringing it up. Um, and that I would be, as someone who lost her mom at an earlier age than many of my peers, that like when they would talk about calling their moms and asking advice, and I would be like, oh yeah, that's something I don't get to do.
Yes.
Or when they would talk about, oh, their children got to be with their grandparents, and I was like, oh well, that's something my children don't get to do. It's not something you can say out loud, but those are the thoughts that are going through in my head.
Yeah.
And so there was never that magic day where it just went away. Fortunately, it got better and I was able to work on it, but it did require me to work on myself. It did require me to actively do things to find joy again and to help make my situation better. And the hard part was it wasn't just the grief. It was also the burnout that had been building as I was experiencing my mom's illness too. And as I was experiencing the challenges of my job and having young children and having a sick parent all at once. And so some of it was working on myself to come out of that, working on caring for my family and taking the time to enjoy my family. And of course, it didn't help that a year later the pandemic happened. And so that made everything worse for a while. But as I learned to come out of that, as I learned to enjoy the moments, as I learned to have gratitude for the good things, even on the bad days, I was able to come out. And my mom died in 2019. And so it's been a while at this point. And so it's no longer a horrible kick in the gut when I tell someone that my mom died, or when somebody says, oh, I'm so sorry. But there's still those bad days. There's still those days that I go to call her and I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Or I want to ask her advice, or I want to share a special moment, or call and say, how do I deal with this thing with my almost teenager? All of those things still happen, but it is so much better now. I would say the grief was fairly complex, but the journey is much better today than it was then.
Yeah. And that's one thing. I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of people, they get fed this nonsense. Oh, this is the way it's supposed to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until it actually happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, hold on, it's nothing like what anybody said. And I
Right.
tell people, I was like, look, it's not going to be like anybody said, because people are speaking from their own perspective. The way that you experience it is going to be a way that you're going to experience it. So any idea, any notion that you think that it's supposed to happen a certain way, go ahead, get rid of that, please.
Right.
Because what you do, and I'm glad that you brought up the burnout, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
people don't associate the burnout with the grief.
Right.
And when you start to put a label on it, or if you begin to identify what that burnout looks like, it's your brain, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's your brain burning out. The grief is I would like to say, and you know, um, I would like to say we call it grief burnout, where the brain is so tired of trying to cover up to try to keep you safe, right? And it takes you into a survival mode. When an individual is trying to keep from going into survival mode, you kind of fight the natural order of the rewiring of the brain.
Mm-hmm. And
And
those
then,
words are perfect because it was all about survival for me. There was a period of
okay.
time where I was just trying to survive.
Mhm.
And the idea of living a life where I was thriving was not even imaginable.
All right.
And that's what I want people to do. I don't want you to just be in survival mode. I want everyone to know what it is to thrive.
Some book over on Instagram says, "Thank you for validating the various issues that brief brings."
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is so much more,
Hmm.
right? because I don't think a lot of people, most people, see, there's different definitions of what we call that as well, right?
Mhm.
We call it brain fog. We call it grief brain. We call it grief burnout, to be
Mhm.
simpler, and there's a few other terms that come along with that, but those are the ones that some people may be a little bit familiar with. And the
Mhm.
only thing that it is that it's your mind disconnecting from your body, so your body can shut off and go into survival mode, right? And this is where most of the people, and please share your experience about this. This is where most people will say, I went, 2 maybe 3 years where I don't remember anything, right?
Yes, there is definitely periods of my life that my husband will talk about,
Hmm.
and my husband will say, "Oh, this is what was going on." I have no recollection of
Right.
those periods of time. I have no recollection of those arguments or of those things. Like, I will see those pictures and be like, "Yes, my children had fun." I but I have no recollection of any of it. I just know that I survived through them. Definitely
Right.
did not thrive through them.
Yeah, let me
I
ask
think
you.
that's absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true, right? Because I tell
Mhm,
people, I had somebody reach out to me not too long ago, and he's like, Tony, apparently people have been trying to find me on social media, but I do a pretty good job of just staying to myself, right? I know it's
mhm,
kind of strange when you see some of the things that I do, but I kind of navigate it to where I try to disassociate myself from my past and
mhm,
everything. So I make it real hard for people to find me. At least I try to anyway. So this young man had reached out to me not too long ago. He goes, Tony, I don't know if you remember me or not, but you and I used to work together a few years back, and I looked at the name. I was like, man, I don't remember who you are. He goes, man, I used to ride in the truck with you all the time. Like I was because I used to drive a trash truck, and and the
mhm,
way that we did things, I had a thrower, I was a driver, and of course, this is the way we always worked together. And so he goes, man, I was your drawer for probably about 9 months. For the life of me, I could not remember who he was, and I had to
mhm.
apologize to him. I said, man, I am so sorry, but when you got to let me know when. And when he told me, I said, see, okay, now that makes sense because
Mhm,
there's 2 years out of my life where I don't remember anything, and it was the first 2 years after my son passed away.
mhm.
And so I went into an automatic routine. I knew what I needed to do during the, I knew
Yep.
I had to go to work during the daytime, come
Mhm,
home. I knew I had to eat, so I know I did a lot of that, right?
mhm.
I know I had to take care of those little small things, but I
Yes.
don't. Other than that, I don't remember coming out of my house much. I had everything that I needed. I had a gym in my house. I had food
Yeah.
and things like that, and I didn't go anywhere anyway. So for me, it was like this is what I
You're on
did.
autopilot. You're on
Right,
autopilot.
your autopilot, right? So now, as someone who is in a medical field that has to sometimes deal with this a lot more often than
Mhm.
than than most people, how do you navigate that as well now? Right, because you've had to navigate your own. So, but you do deal with these things. How do you navigate those two worlds without keeping them intersecting with one another?
The truth is I've stopped trying to separate
Mm,
them. I think it's
okay.
dangerous to separate them. I actually think it's really important to share in both spaces. And so I think it makes me a better doctor to share with my patients that I know what they're going through. I think it's really important to share with some of my patients, for example, that have aging parents, that I have been there, that I have experience the some of them they I come in and maybe their parents are their patients or maybe they're my patients and they are
Mhm.
going through the conversations about do we move into some place that's safer, do we have these end of life conversations, how do we navigate these, and I share that I've done those conversations. I remember being that person, and my mom didn't care that I was her daughter. She just cared, I mean, excuse me, my mom didn't care that I was a doctor. She just cared that I was her daughter. She didn't think I knew anything. She just knew that I was her daughter and that I was supposed to listen to her. And so I can share that perspective. And means that they know I understand what they're going through. It's sort of like when I became a parent, I became a better doctor for the kids that I take care of too, because I knew how to anticipate the questions that the parents had. And so I do really think it's important to share those things. I also think it's important for my family to know when I've had a bad day or when I've had difficult cases at work, because it means that they're able to give me space of, okay, mom has to deal today, or mom needs to have the space to do this. And so I used to be very siloed, and I think that that pushed me harder into burnout. I think that that made my grief worse. But when I learned that I could be human in both spaces, that really meant that I was a better person in both spaces, I think. And going back to what you were saying too about how there's like this textbook view of what grief is supposed to be, but we all experience it a little bit differently. I think the other thing that's really important to validate that I didn't really pay attention to until I went through it was that it also matters what you're experiencing before you go into it. So, like, if you already have a little bit of anxiety, or you're already having a tough time, or you already have depression before you go into the grief, it's going to be that much worse because you don't necessarily have the resilience or the capacity or the extra space before it hits. And for some of my patients and for me, the grief started before the death actually happened. The grief
Yes.
started leading
Yeah.
up to it. And so my mom was declining for a long period of time. And so I was watching it happen for a while. And so it was like a year of decline. And so it was almost like I was on this ledge for so long of watching it happen. And it's going to sound horrible to some people, but when my mom died, it was almost a little bit of relief because I
Yeah.
watched her no longer be suffering. But it also then was like permission that I could start the process. But the truth was, some of that was already building up.
Hmm.
And you're not supposed to talk about that. And so I will share that with my patients. Like, it's okay to already start to feel bad. It's okay as you're going through being the caregiver or making these tough decisions to have those feelings already. We don't talk about that enough. That
Right.
lead up time is really important and part of the process too.
Well, and I think a lot of times people don't know how to identify it, right? And
Mhm.
being someone in this field, in the grief field, I tell people, look, you got a pre and post grief, right? You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? You got that grief that starts long before the death or the passing
Right.
of your loved one happens. Your
Yes.
body is already in tune with it, depending on the relationship that you have
Right.
with that individual. Like if you're in tune with someone, like you said, here's where people will sometimes simplify. They will say it's anticipatory grief. You're already anticipating the inevitable, which
Mhm.
causes the rise in anxiety, the rise in the overwhelmness, the rise in the hypervigilance to be able to function right without going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, because your brain is constantly going, is this the day, is this the moment, is this the second, right? And so people don't know how to slow that down, and it's totally normal, as you said, and people don't talk about it, and I think that they should, right?
Mhm.
Because it would help people begin the process of saying, maybe I can develop some techniques
Mhm.
to help with this as I begin to start this transition. Because what people don't understand, as your loved one is starting to transition, whether if it's sudden or
Mhm.
whether if it's prolonged, you begin to transition with them,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Your body begins to rewire itself to prepare
Yep.
you for what's coming.
Mhm.
Your mind will begin to switch things on to prepare you to look at the world through different eyes.
Mhm.
Your brain will begin to teach you certain things about how to start to navigate the new world, and then it would leave blank pages for you to fill in. And I think that's where, if and I, I'm just speaking from my own experience. I think the
Mhm.
blank pages is where your own personal experience get written inside
Mhm.
of there, right?
Yeah.
So it's important. It's important to learn how to articulate, because grief can be a beautiful thing,
Mhm.
right? Grief can be a beautiful thing, but it's going to be painful
Mhm.
as well, right?
Mhm.
And you said something, because a lot of people don't. I don't think a lot of people get to this point, the place of gratitude and appreciation, right? Because the relief that comes along with that. And I heard this so many times. They go, man, I didn't want them to go, but I was so sick and tired of watching them suffer that when they passed away, I was relieved, but I felt guilty that I
Mhm.
felt this way. I go, yeah, I know,
Yes. Yeah.
because no one wants that for your loved one.
Right.
No one,
Right.
right? So now it leads me to my next question. Do you think it prepared you to have conversations with your children, to prepare them to? And the reason why I asked this question, and it's something I taught my son on a day-to-day basis ever since he was probably about 4 years old. I used to remind him, son, baby boy, my Bubba, one day I'm not going to be here. So I need to teach you what you need to know to live in this world without me, right? And my son,
Mhm.
after a while, it's like it registered to him. He goes,
Mhm.
Daddy, like, can you teach me? Can you teach me this? So he used to jump on the chair with me, and I would teach him how to cook,
Mhm.
right? And when we was cleaning up the house, Bubba, you know what you need to do? Yes, yes, sir. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna clean up my room. And then after that, I'm gonna go ahead and wash my face and brush my teeth. So he was already, I was already teaching him those things, and I think that's where a lot of parents tend to want to protect their kids from such things. Now, and again, it goes back to the question. Go back to the question in the beginning. Do you think that it helps communicating with your kids to help prepare them?
I think that's a great question. And I don't think I have ever framed it that way with my children. However, my children have lost three of their four grandparents
Hmm.
already.
Okay.
And my husband and I are very big on teaching our children to be autonomous. So we live in a city and our children take the train by themselves to get to school. It's something that this day and age, a lot of families aren't having their kids do. Our children take the L train, and folks are shocked when I tell them that. My now 10-year-old can make lunch on the stove. And I mean, so can my 12-year-old, but my 10-year-old is doing that, just like you said. Like we're teaching them to do all of these things so that they don't know to do this. We're preparing them to live on their own. We think it's something that's really important, and know that that's somewhat different than some other people that are our age, or some of their peers. We think it's really important for them to have the skills to be on their own, and to be autonomous.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important. I will say that my oldest child was old enough to feel a lot of the anxiety that came with losing her grandmother. And so they did engage in grief therapy, both of them. They did group therapy for children, which was absolutely amazing. My mom was in hospice when she passed. And so I took advantage of that for them because I really do believe in the benefits of going through that. And so had access to this for them. And so my oldest also did one-on-one therapy. And I truly believe that the skills that she gained in that really just helped with coping, and have made her a calmer person than I ever was at her age, and sort of
Yeah.
managing some of those things. And we do talk about that now. I talk about how she definitely still has some of the tendencies that I had, and I talk about how some of the skills that she gained from then are different than some of the skills that I never learned at her age, and how that
Right.
is so important for getting through life, how when things are difficult, that's important. And so I do think it has shaped the worldview in our family of how to move forward and how to manage the unexpected. And right now, as our world is going through lots of transition, I don't just think of grief as death. I think of grief in lots of different things. And so we've been talking about it in how do you just manage the transition in general? And so how do you cope with transition? And so it has shifted our conversations with our children. Absolutely.
I think, and I could be wrong. Give me your thoughts on this. I don't want to assume anything, but I want to believe that when we have our workers in the health field, it, it helps them have a different sort of conversation with their patients, right? Having that empathy, especially if you've experienced it yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It a lot of times, and and again, when I speak about this, I'm only speaking from the point of view of my experience, from what I've
Mm-hmm.
seen, right? And maybe some suggestions, but I also have seen where health practitioners have gone. They've analyzed the situation instead of rushing right into it, and they look at the family and they come to them and go, "Hey, would you like to come with it?" Like they will see the energy that's being fed off of one another. They will
Mm-hmm.
begin to go, "Hey, would you like to come sit over here and just breathe with me for a little bit?"
Mm-hmm.
And they know how to hold space with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do it happen all the time? No, because I think there's a lot of excitement that goes along with there when people
Mm-hmm.
are, trying to figure out what's going on, so, but then you find those ones that are just like, hey, would you like to come sit over here? And then someone that has the child and they go, hey, would you like to come and play with some toys with me? Maybe we can sit down
Mm-hmm.
and talk. And they begin to ask that child certain questions like, how do you feel right now? I don't know. Well, would you like some paper, something like that? Would you like some crayons? You can draw whatever you want, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this allows the family not to worry about what the child is going through, and then separating the parents and go, hey, let us know what we can do for you, and putting people that can relate to them, right, in
Mm-hmm.
certain ways, and be like, hey, like you may not want to talk or anything like that, but I'm going to sit over here. I'll be back over here in the back room. If you need me, let me know. And I love seeing that, right? I love seeing that. Just a thought. I would love to see a lot more of that, but I think I want to say I believe that it would take grief practitioners, bereavement coaches, and practitioners to work together within places like hospice or funeral homes or hospitals and maybe doctors' offices and things like that, especially when a person is diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Yeah. So, and I will say, I've seen some places do this well, and I've seen some places not do it well. And I think that's what you're
Right,
alluding
right.
to as well, right? Like, I can say that I'm part of medical education. And so I've seen some medical education incorporate chaplains in part of the
Mhm.
teaching, where chaplains, and these are non-denominational chaplains, so it doesn't have to be for a specific faith, but are able to teach the medical students about holding space in this. And
Mhm.
so I think that there's at least recognition, that this is an important space. And I've seen some chaplains be part of rounds for this to be able to be present. I will say, when I was going through this with my mom, I had to specifically ask for palliative care. I had to specifically
Mhm.
ask for chaplain services. That was one of the things that I knew about the services that I had to ask for. It was not specifically offered for me. I was specifically told that it wasn't necessary, but I asked for it and had to demand it. And there was one person there that advocated for me and helped me get it. And so that was one of those things that could have gone much smoother,
Mhm.
in my own experience, that I am still like when I look back, I'm still annoyed about to this day. And that I wish
Understood.
was better for everyone else,
Right, right.
and so yes, there's some places that do really well about it, and sometimes people don't know that it exists. And I agree when there's the capacity for it, I think it's great. Um, I think that unfortunately it's not always available. And our healthcare system is such that even those people who want to do it don't always have their own capacity to do it.
Right,
Like
right.
I will say, when I was in the worst of my grief and burnout, I wasn't the person to do it, right? I didn't necessarily have the emotional capacity to do it for other people. I wasn't the right person to do it. Now, absolutely, I'm the right person to do it when I see a family going through it. And so I would say, I would remind someone that's going through this, like, remember that we're human too, that the healthcare workers are human too. And so we have our bad days. And that doesn't excuse it at all, but it's just a reality. And I would love to advocate for there to be more social workers, to be more chaplains, to be more counselors that are available for when this is happening. And like you said, not just for when deaths happen, but for when the diagnoses are happening and for when major changes are happening, for when family meetings need to happen so that families can process together and be prepared. There's so many times when this could be more helpful in our systems.
Mm-hmm. Man, I love that. I love that. Now, I know you didn't talk about your dad much. I want to talk about that. And if you don't mind, it may be a
Yeah,
little personal. Um, which one passed away first, your dad or your mother?
my dad.
Your dad. Okay. So now, which makes this question a little bit more easier to ask. Do you think that the passing of your dad, because and the reason why I ask this question, because as a young lady, your dad is the person who molded, that you look up to, your role model, and things like that. Girls are daddy's baby, daddy's girls, right? You know what I'm saying? And then somewhere down the line, you become mommy's little girl.
Mhm.
Do you think the passing of your dad helped prepare you um, of the reality of what was coming with your mother, or was it different? And the reason why I ask, because sometimes people's relationships vary.
Yeah, so I would say I was closer to my mom than I was to my dad. So the my
Mhm.
mom's was harder actually. I
Okay.
think if you were to, yeah, I was for most of my life I was closer to my mom. And so
Okay.
that one was much harder. And the it was harder with my dad for different reasons. Like my dad was in a different state, so it was flying back and forth, and different people were involved, like different family members were involved. We haven't talked about this part, but like the relationships of different family members also impacts how you feel and the different ways you navigate things. Um, and when I was dealing with my dad, I was also miscarrying at the same time. And so, like, there was different grief that was happening too. And so, it was just a different, every grief experience is just different. And so that was a challenge. And then my dad did have some choice in some of what happened. Like my dad had choice in going on hospice himself. The pathways were a little bit different, but none of it is easy. None of it is fun,
Right.
and it's. I think that having gone through the mechanics of what happened with my dad helped prepare some of what it was for my mom, because there's also just the when you go through death, there's the additional pieces of just having to also go through the estate matters and all of the
Mhm.
other pieces.
Mhm.
And my sister did most of it for my dad. We had different moms, so like she did a lot of it with my dad, and it was my husband and I dealing with my mom. And so there there was just also just the different components there. Um, there's just so much involved with grief. It's hard to even think through all of the parts that go through it. And like you said, so much of it is a blur after you go through it that when you think back of what were the steps you walked through, it's hard to even recall.
Yeah, and that's I'm glad that you touched on that because there are so many different components that go along with there, right? And but that's the way it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
Not only is it a change in the way that you begin to perceive the world, but it's a change in the way you perceive relationships with other people, right?
Mhm.
Relationships with yourself, right? Relationships with the work that you do.
Mhm.
There's so many things that go along with that. And as you was talking about that, I started thinking to myself, as someone in a grief field that's always looking of ways to become of value to those in the different fields that may at some point, if they're not already, contribute to the way that we can support one another, but also bring those resources to one another, to bring that education to one another, not without taking away from what a person does. Look, I when this work chose me, I fell in love with it, right? And so
Mhm.
I saw the value in going into places and going, hey, let me do this over here for not only you guys, but for the people that you have coming in. So things like death cafes, because you
Mhm.
mentioned something, having to deal with the estate in the afterwards, or trying to figure out the loose ends that you did not know, what I'm saying? Like who's gonna
Mhm.
get what, and what I'm saying, what's gonna supposed to happen to this. So for me, a death cafe would be something that I would go in and go, look, this is free for people to attend. If you don't mind, I would like to do it once a month. Do it right over here since people are already coming in, right? And this is a
Mhm.
great way for the medical, our healthcare practitioners to come in and go, hey, go over here and check this out, right? And from there, in the Death Cafe, we help normalize the conversations. We help come up with a plan.
Mhm.
Your end of life, right? Since we're already right there, right? Let's come up with an end of life plan. That way, now once we have this, we're going to take it and fold it up. We're going to give it to the medical staff. Can you put this in their file,
Mhm.
right? That way, it takes out the guessing work from everything and takes off that extra load. But I think I want to say we have to bridge the gap between um, combining our works together, right? Even when it comes down to mental health, even when it comes down
Mhm.
to trauma recovery, we have to be able to bridge the gap without taking away from what someone else does and saying, oh, well, you do this, you need to add this in. No, how about we say, you do this over here. We love the fact that you do this. This is what we
Yes.
do. Let us do this over here, and that way it will help
Let us
what you do
collaborate.
over there. Yeah, let us
Mhm.
collaborate, right? And
Mhm.
so I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about that idea? Because for me, I bounced my head off the walls, and as a young man doing this, I come across some challenges, but I'm annoying, so those challenges don't really bother me too much. I'm gonna keep doing what I do, right? Because I do see the benefits in it. But what are your thoughts on that, please?
I think that that's right. I think that that's what makes sense because I think that going back to the things that I like to support people in, it's how do I make the biggest difference in this world? Like, how do I
Mhm.
go out and support other people? And that is doing what I am the best at, doing what I find the most value and purpose in. And
Mhm.
so that's not in doing everything. I'm not the best at doing everything. So I'm the best at doing what I do. And sometimes that involves knowing I'm not the best at having this other conversation. And maybe it's
Right.
handing that other conversation off to someone else. And truthfully, learning that was part of this is going to sound silly and bringing it all back. And that was part of learning that skill, was part of what helped get me out of grief and helped get me out of burnout, was knowing that I didn't have to do it all. It was knowing that somebody else was better at some of those parts than I was, that I didn't have to be everything to everyone. It was that I could connect them with someone else to do that thing.
Love that. I love that. And as we begin to wrap this up and everything, because I know you got a busy day and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I do love having these conversations, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge, and as well as your experience with this. This is a lot of people have been tuning in on Instagram, and the things that they're saying, like, yep, I know we've experienced a lot of these things. So you guys, I want to say thank you guys and everything. So I have two more questions for you.
Please.
One question: how can people find you?
You can find me in lots of places. The easiest way to find me is Instagram, and that's at Dr. Tina Wheat. And then I have a YouTube channel, which is Chaos to Calm MD, where I'm trying to, in both of those places, help people figure out how to conquer their chaos and figure out how to get to calm. And so the Chaos to Calm MD YouTube channel is Santina Wheat LLC is the app part of the YouTube. And then my website is www.santinawheat.com. So it's just my full name. Those are the easiest ways to find me.
Okay. And for everybody tuning in, her information is in the YouTube channel below. So go there, check it out. Go there, check out. If you love this conversation that we've been having, find it informed. She has a lot more going on. Like, we didn't even scratch the surface on the amount of knowledge that she has. Okay. So go there, check it out, please. You know what I'm saying? Show that support. You guys already know how to do that. And so now the second question to you would be, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, well, I think I do have a superpower. And I think my superpower is to see where the obstacles are going to be. And that sounds horrible and pessimistic when I say it out loud, but I think it's great because it means that I can plan for where the chaos is going to be. It means that I can plan and navigate to the good. But the real superpower that I would love to have would be just to be able to fly, because my new joy really in life is traveling with my family.
Yeah.
And we do not love being on planes, but we love getting places. And so if I could just fly us places and get to travel the world without sitting on a plane, it would make us all so much happier.
I love it, but I also love the fact that you brought it up. And to be honest with you, it doesn't sound strange to be able to see the obstacles, to be able to navigate those things and everything. I find that to be fascinating, very beautiful, because I think most people, especially those in service to others, we often want to see the obstacles to help people navigate it, to kind of lessen the blow of what's going on, but also to kind of stay in, kind of like, hey, hold on, this is what's coming. You mind if I kind of cushion the blow for you a little bit, right? Because no one wants to see anybody suffer. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful superpower. I really do. And now,
well, it means that we can also navigate around it and sometimes avoid it.
Right,
And it took me a while to grow into the benefit of it, to be honest, but I'm growing into it.
Can I add to that? Because I don't think it's something that needs to be avoided. I think it's something to be able to walk into with an open mind, right? And learning a little bit of, and developing some emotional awareness so you can have emotional intelligence, right? But you have to develop the emotional awareness and have an understanding that when all of these things come about, slow yourself down. Learn to articulate what you're feeling, so you can tell someone, hey, this is what I need right now, right? Because a lot of times, doctor, a lot of times people don't know what they need. And so
Right.
that superpower that you just mentioned would be a great way to kind of help navigate those little obstacles, right?
Absolutely.
To anticipate them and go, I got you. Because I don't think there's any other words except for the words I love you than the words I got you. Right? I
Absolutely.
got you,
Absolutely.
right? You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And a person feels comfortable to know that you got them.
Yes. Yes.
So I
Absolutely.
find that to be beautiful. I find that to be beautiful. Um, so one last thing. One last thing.
Please.
If you could leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
I would love to leave the audience with lots of things, but I would really love to leave you with have gratitude for what you have. And this is something that I've really come to embrace later in my life that I did not appreciate. This is one of the places that I have really grown and that has been so meaningful for me and has really helped me in my journey out of grief. And if I can share a quick story, I will say my growth in gratitude was getting an email from someone who I had hired into a role. And I got an email from her on a day that was just a really bad day for me. And she said, "You taught me that I could love what I was doing and still not be happy about certain situations." And it was something that took her 10 minutes to write and probably less. And she didn't have to do it. And that moment brought me so much joy on a day that I couldn't tell you why, but was a really bad day for me. And I don't remember what it was, but it was just like a multitude of things had gone wrong. And it was a moment that was sort of a turning point for me of how impactful something really small could be. And so I started really incorporating gratitude. So now in all of my team meetings, I ask for people to share the wins that they've had. What are the things that they're grateful for that have happened that day? What are the things that they want us to share so that we can do? I try really hard to tell my patients that I'm grateful for the wins that they've had in their visits. I try really hard to tell my kids what I'm grateful for what they've done, and tell my husband what I'm grateful for what they've done, and my learners the same thing. And those little moments have brought so much joy for me in sharing that gratitude and have changed the atmosphere around me. And those moments don't take very long. They take a while to rewire your brain to do them if you're not used to doing them, but they don't cost anything, but they bring joy and remind you that there's good things in life, even when you're having bad days, even when you're in the midst of grief, even when you're in the midst of burnout, and can really change how you're feeling about the world. And I did share with Tony, I have a journal that I share with people that is helping you get into the gratitude mindset if you're interested, that just gives you a different prompt every single day to help you with gratitude because I think it's so important.
Love that. I definitely love that. And with that being said, first I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your knowledge, and your journey with us. Such a powerful, powerful movement, and the understanding burnout a lot more, right?
Mhm.
And I want to say first and foremost, thank you for being who you are, right, and helping make a
Yeah.
difference in people's lives. And because it just again changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. That's what we're out here trying to do for individuals. And with that being said, for everyone who has been tuning in, as we wrap this up, thank you guys for allowing me to keep bringing these conversations with you guys. And again, go check out Dr. Santina. Her information is in the YouTube channel. She has a YouTube channel, so go check her out. Ask some questions, okay? Ask some
Mhm.
questions. Make sure
Please
you're
do.
getting the support that you need and deserve from people like Dr. Santina that's out here and have been through it, right? He's walking the walk and talking the talk, guys. And for everyone else who have been tuning in, if you haven't already, do me a favor, head on over to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, if you know anyone who can benefit from the conversations that we have, please share this along with them. With that being said, guys, thank you for allowing me to do this. Thank you for your support. I love you. We're going to see you guys in the next one.